we are looking at the budget. I think it's we have to look at it in the environment and context we are in. So clearly these are challenging times on a global basis. Huge uncertainty on account of geopolitics, tariffs and all of that. So the need of the hour was first and foremost to preserve macro stability. I think the budget does a very decent job.
ये जो STT जो रेज किया है बजट में, उसके वजह से मार्केट में काफ़ी कमी आई थी, मतलब निफ्टी काफ़ी नीचे गिरा था. हमारा वॉल्यूम्स इतना ज़्यादा है, रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स हैव गॉटन अ टेस्ट फॉर फ्यूचर्स एंड F&O trading. How do you see this pattern playing out?
As far as the market is concerned or sentiment, देखिए, I think short term में एक दिन या कुछ घंटों का असर होगा, but beyond that it does not matter, especially for investors who are looking at Indian markets with a medium long term view or through equity as an asset class. And India is one of those few regions in the world where this structural opportunity is here to stay. We're just a 4 trillion. There's nothing to prevent this becoming a 8-10 trillion over the years and beyond as well. The one part which India will miss out at this stage under the data center capex will be the
वेलकम टू बाजार एंड बियॉन्ड. आज हमारे साथ हैं गौरव मिश्रा, को-हेड इक्विटी एट मिरे एसेट म्यूचुअल फंड. इन दिस एपिसोड हम यूनियन बजट 2026, बदलता हुआ यूएस इंडिया ट्रेड रिलेशनशिप और ग्लोबल जियोपॉलिटिक्स के उन क्रॉस करंट्स को डिकोड करेंगे जो कैपिटल फ्लोज और इंडियन मार्केट्स को इम्पैक्ट कर रहे हैं. Thank you, Gaurav, for doing this with us and taking out the time to be on Bazaar and Beyond. I wanted to start off with your view on the budget, union budget that was presented a few days ago. What is your prognosis in terms of what it gets right and what, say, you need to see the details? I mean, you must have seen the details, but you need to see how these things play out on the ground over the next 12 months.
Yeah, good morning, Vivek. So, for our viewers, good morning as well. So, in terms of how we are looking at the budget, I think it's we have to look at it in the environment and context we are in. So clearly these are challenging times on a global basis. Huge uncertainty on account of geopolitics, tariffs, and all of that. So the need of the hour was first and foremost to preserve macro stability. Okay. I think the budget does a very decent job in that, and I'll just elaborate. And the second was to continue with the momentum, a pro-growth momentum, if I may, and the budget again does a good job on that. So to me, on the things that matter for growth, for stability and growth of the economy, and therefore the underlying corporates as well, hopefully, the budget's done a good job. So first, of course, in terms of the macro stability, if we think of post-COVID, deficits were raised immensely by all countries in the world to tackle the COVID situation. We had gone to over 9% of GDP as fiscal deficit, and over the years that has now been brought down. We've ended at 4.4%. Now the need of the hour was to keep on consolidating. And the budget has done that in a way. It's consolidating further down to 4.3%, and with assumptions which are fairly reasonable and realistic. If I may. Conservative. So there's nominal growth of 10%, which should be broadly achievable as the year goes by. Expenses growth is one part, but more importantly is the revenue part, because we have seen the government in last year that in case there's any revenue shortfall, they're able to then adjust downwards the expenditure so that they meet their deficit target. But as I was saying, so the assumptions on the revenue side are also equally conservative, against last year's 7% growth in overall revenue collections. This year also it's projected to be at 7%. Within that, about 10% of the tax collections is essentially from excise, which has seen a slightly higher growth at 16% YOY, but we know that is completely justifiable because of collections from cigarette, which has been raised. So that's yes. So that is clearly coming in. But besides that, for instance, GST, which is 23% of the collections, that is actually down by 2%.
Yeah, it's because of the GST cuts.
GST cuts. But then, if the economy were to show slightly better buoyancy, and as a base effect, it's possible that we have a surprise on the GST collections. We could also, have leeway on excise collections, say through, excise increase in retail fuel like petrol, diesel, which is not built in. But if crude is favorable and where we are at the retail fuel pump prices, there's scope for that as well. So On the revenue collection side, I think it's reasonably all right. On the expenditure side, and that's where I'll move beyond macro stability, we're also, it's a pro-growth budget. By pro-growth, I mean that, last couple of years, because of the huge fiscal deficit tightening, reduction, there was a contractionary impulse to the economy because then the government was withdrawing and reducing their expenditure. This year, as I'm saying, it's just going down from 4.4 to 4.3%. And that's because their matrix, their target has changed from, earlier just the actual headline number of deficit as percentage. Now it's gone down, it's now changed to central government debt to GDP. So if it was 56.1 last year, the target is to reach 50% plus minus 1% by FY31. This year it is going to be 55.6 or thereabouts. So the government has used that medium-term target to judiciously have a lesser reduction in fiscal deficit, and therefore the contractionary impulse coming from the government sector is much reduced this year. It's just 10 basis points. So to that extent, it is a bit more pro-growth than the prior years, where the reductions in fiscal deficits were in the order of 40 basis points to GDP or even more, And secondly, if you think of the nature of expenditure the government is incurring this time around, it remains to be, on a qualitatively improving profile. And what I mean by that is that the thrust remains on the highest productivity sectors of the economy, those sectors where there is highest multiplier effect on the economy. So this budget, we have seen about a 12% increase in allocations to infra, capex, and those headings. Overall expenditure increase is just about 8%. Revenue expenditure is 7%. So you got 8 as the average. Revenue is only 7, but the most productive part is at 12%. Which is all the infra and capex, which has the highest multiplier. So therefore, again, it is pro-growth and in that sense. And of course, besides this, the budget, the central government PSU, expenditure, capex is also projected to grow at over 11.5%. And then beyond just these headline numbers, which are allocated to these ministries which come under infra and all of that, there are other parts from the budget which are again supportive of medium-term thrust towards infra and capex formation. So, for instance, there's this mention of 7 high-speed rail corridors. That's again not going to happen overnight. It's going to take 5-6 years, but directionally it is in that it adds up to the I think 12-14% increase in the rail budget this year. Similarly, there's mention and some allocations towards city economic regions, towards tier 2, tier 3 cities. That builds up the urban infra part of it. And then also, of course, there is this whole tax concession to global investors in the data centers. Now, data centers have been a huge driver of capital expenditure globally, especially in the US. And there's no reason why India shouldn't see, capex, really picking up there. After all, we are a large, kind of data generating economy, and there's scope for a lot of that to be domiciled within India for Indian needs, but also maybe, to service other geographies. And I think that incentive and tax holidays for data center investments could also be, should spur reasonable private capex, under that segment. So therefore, it's to conclude, I would say that it's not only, promoted macro stability, it's also, promoting growth. And lastly, we have to look at growth in context of what has transpired in the last couple of years. Post-COVID, there was a support to infra, share of infra and capex moved up from within 2% to now over 3.1%, and that sustains even in this budget. Last year, there was a tilt towards also giving a support to consumption, but as we know in the medium long term, all the engines of the economy have to fire to create a virtuous cycle of sustainable growth. And in that sense, this budget has reiterated that, thrust of also continuing with the support towards the infra capex side to build the capabilities and capacities of the system, and then the rest will follow.
Correct. So इसका एक follow-up पूछना था मुझे सर, स्पेसिफिकली इन टर्म्स ऑफ मैंने एक रेफरेंस लूँगा पुराने इकोनॉमिक सर्वे में, जिन्होंने जब चीफ इकोनॉमिक एडवाइजर ने बोलता है अबाउट क्राउडिंग इन प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट. अभी आपको लगता है कि पिछले 3-4 साल में और आज के बजट में, आज इस साल के बजट में जो अनाउंस हुआ है, आपको लग रहा है कि क्राउडिंग इन हो रहा है? बिकॉज वो अर्निंग्स में रिजल्ट दिख नहीं रहा है कि इतना क्राउडिंग इन होने के बाद भी वो द पी लेवल्स ऑफ लाइक एवरेज पी लेवल्स में जिस पे ट्रेड कर रहे हैं, इट इज़ क्वाइट हाई, लाइक द फॉरवर्ड पी हिस्टोरिकली. सो दैट मीन्स पीपल आर स्टिल बीइंग आस्क्ड टू पे more to own the same shares today. In terms of say निफ्टी 50 का अगर देख लें, अभी रिसेंटली तो करेक्ट हुआ है बिकॉज ऑफ द डिसलोकेशन जो हुआ है मार्केट में, बजट के अनाउंस हुआ है, बट टिल अ फ्यू वीक्स बैक Indian investors and foreign investors were being asked more to pay, and that India risk premium was also being attached and talked about in the same way. अभी आज अगर देखें बजट के बाद जो ट्रेड डील्स अनाउंस हुए EU का, do you think that narrative of India risk premium will continue and earnings will follow also? And I mean, what is your view on that specifically?
ओके नहीं, इसमें आपके 2-3 प्रश्न हैं अलग अलग. एक तो है कि प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट का क्राउडिंग, तो उसमें देखिए नो डाउट थोड़ा सा पिछले कुछ सालों से प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट ऑन एन एग्रीगेट बेसिस टोटल में थोड़ा सा ग्रोथ कम था, बट धीरे धीरे वो भी पिकअप हो रहा है. अगर हम पिछले 2-3 क्वार्टर से देखें तो अनाउंसमेंट्स ऑफ न्यू प्रोजेक्ट्स वो महीने क्वार्टर बाय क्वार्टर इंक्रीज हो रहे हैं थ्रू प्राइवेट ऑफ द प्राइवेट सेक्टर. तो होपफुली वो और मोमेंटम बना रहना चाहिए. इसमें क्या है कि कुछ कुछ बड़े बड़े सेक्टर्स हैं जहाँ केपेक्स पहले बहुत कस के होता था, जैसे पावर है, मेटल्स माइनिंग है, ऑयल एंड गैस पेट्रोकेम है, वो बहुत बड़े सेक्टर्स हैं. बाकी जो हैं चाहे वो ऑटोमोबाइल हो, कंजम्पशन, ड्यूरेबल्स, ये सब उससे जो एग्रीगेट नंबर्स हैं वो इतने मूव नहीं करते हैं. तो अदरवाइज बॉटम अप कंपनीज डी बॉटलनेक, न्यू प्लांट्स आप सुन रहे होंगे ऑटोमोबाइल्स PLI स्कीम के अंडर, तो वो सब हो रहा है. बट हाँ, जो कुछ कुछ बहुत बड़े सेक्टर जैसे मेटल्स वहाँ पर थोड़ा स्लो डाउन था, वहाँ पर भी अब अनाउंसमेंट्स और पिकअप आ रहा है. सो मतलब आई एम कंस्ट्रक्टिव कि प्राइवेट केपेक्स ऑल्सो शुड पिकअप. और अब जैसे डेटा सेंटर की बात हुई है, आई थिंक उससे भी थोड़ा सा और पिकअप होना चाहिए. जहाँ तक रही बात मार्केट की वैल्यूएशंस की, देखिए वो क्वेश्चन आपका वैलिड था अगर हम लोग 1 साल पहले बात कर रहे होते, तब नो डाउट हम लोग भी बोल रहे थे कि वैल्यूएशंस हाई हैं, अबव एवरेज हैं. बट देखिए पिछले 1 साल से मार्केट करेक्ट हुआ है उससे, और ऐसा नहीं है कि अर्निंग्स नहीं आई हैं, अर्निंग्स आई हैं. आप कोई भी कैटेगरी देखिए, लार्ज कैप, मिड, स्मॉल, अर्निंग्स आई हैं. भले थोड़े कट्स हुए हैं पिछले साल में, बट स्टिल मिड सिंगल डिजिट अपवर्ड्स अर्निंग्स आई हैं. तो और टाइम भी निकला है, तो इसकी वजह से वैल्यूएशंस करेक्ट हुए हैं. और जो इमर्जिंग मार्केट या रेस्ट ऑफ वर्ल्ड के प्रीमियम पे इंडिया ट्रेड करता था वो अब काफ़ी कम हो गया. इनफैक्ट मैं कहूँगा इनफैक्ट लोज पे है इस समय, हिस्टोरिकल एवरेजेस के. प्रीमियम पे है बट जो उसके एवरेज प्रीमियम रहता था उसके लोज पे है इस समय. देखिए अब नो डाउट साथ साथ क्या हो रहा था कि ग्लोबली एक ट्रेड चल रहा था कि AI स्टॉक्स और जो इकॉनमीज AI ट्रेड से बेनिफिट कर रही थी, US था या ये अपनी फार एशियन कंट्रीज़ थी जो चिप मेकिंग या उन सब की AI ट्रेड से के बेनिफिशरीज थी, उनका पार्टिसिपेशन हुआ है. उनके स्टार्टिंग वैल्यूएशंस 1 साल पहले सस्ते भी थे इंडिया से, तो और प्लस AI का भी बेनिफिट है, तो नो डाउट वहाँ पर रिटर्न्स बहुत अच्छे मिले हैं और इंडिया इस समय अंडर परफॉर्म किया है. बट जैसा कि मैं कह रहा था, अब वैल्यूएशंस भी काफ़ी हद तक एवरेज लेवल्स पे आए हैं, नंबर 1. अब आगे जाके आउटलुक इस पे निर्भर करेगा कि जो इंडिया की अर्निंग्स है वो और कट तो नहीं हो रही है, और जो ग्रोथ प्रोजेक्टेड है अर्निंग्स का, कॉर्पोरेट अर्निंग्स है, जो कि इस समय डबल डिजिट में है नेक्स्ट 1 साल के लिए, नेक्स्ट 2 साल के लिए पर ईयर. होपफुली अगर वो वैसे ही आता है तब थोड़ा सा इंटरेस्ट इन्वेस्टर्स का और स्ट्रॉन्गर होगा इंडिया पे. बट वो हमको देखना है कि कैसे पैन आउट होता है.
ये जो STT जो रेज किया है बजट में, उसके वजह से मार्केट में काफ़ी कमी आई थी, मतलब निफ्टी काफ़ी नीचे गिरा था. एंड देयर वाज अ स्टेटमेंट आल्सो फ्रॉम गवर्नमेंट ऑफिशियल कि हमको स्पेकुलेशन कम करना है. आई मीन यू आर फ्रॉम द बाय साइड, सो ऑब्वियसली दिस इज म्यूजिक टू योर ईयर्स. मगर आपको लगता है कि ये हो पाएगा? बिकॉज हमारा वॉल्यूम्स इतना ज़्यादा है, रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स हैव गॉटन अ टेस्ट फॉर फ्यूचर्स एंड F&O ट्रेडिंग. हाउ डू यू सी दिस पैटर्न प्लेइंग आउट? बिकॉज ये 2 साल एक पहले ऑप्शन में किया था, अभी फ्यूचर्स में किया है. You just your prognosis and on the larger capital markets industry also, how do you see this playing out?
As far as the market is concerned or sentiment, देखिए आई थिंक शॉर्ट टर्म में 1 दिन या कुछ घंटों का असर होगा, बट बियॉन्ड दैट इट डज नॉट मैटर, स्पेशली फॉर इन्वेस्टर्स हु आर लुकिंग एट Indian markets with the medium long term view or through equity as an asset class. But जो लोग trading कर रहे हैं, I can understand कि उनको अपने कैलकुलेशन में लेना पड़ेगा. कुछ इंस्टेंसेस हैं हिस्टोरिकली जब 2023-24 में रेट्स बढ़े थे एसटीटी, उसके बाद लेकिन शायद देखा गया था कि वॉल्यूम्स पे इतना असर नहीं हुआ था. इस बार हो सकता हो क्योंकि मैग्नीट्यूड ऑफ ऑलरेडी ऑन अ हायर बेस इज स्लाइटली मीनिंगफुल मे बी इन फ्यूचर्स. कितना वॉल्यूम्स पे असर होगा, मतलब आई हैव सीन एस्टिमेट्स एनीवेयर बिटवीन 0 to 15%. मतलब ये ब्रॉडली ये समझ में आता है कि भाई जो ट्रेड्स बहुत फाइन मार्जिन पे हो रहे थे और उनकी प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी इम्पैक्ट हो सकती है बिकॉज ऑफ दिस इंक्रीज. सो स्पेशली जो हाई फ्रीक्वेंसी ट्रेडर्स होते हैं विद हाई वॉल्यूम्स, हो सकता है दैट गेट्स इम्पैक्टेड. बट इट्स अ गेस कि कि उसकी वजह से कितने वॉल्यूम्स ड्रॉप होगा. वी हैव टू सी, बट एज आई एम सेइंग मे बी 0 to 15% इज द रेंज बॉल पार्क. सिमिलरली रिटेल इन्वेस्टर जो थोड़ा सा फाइन उस पर कर रहे थे वो. बट आई वुड जस्ट से दैट बिसाइड्स दैट फ्रॉम कैपिटल मार्केट पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, येस देयर आर अ कपल ऑफ ब्रोकर्स जिनके थोड़े से वॉल्यूम्स इस कैटेगरी से आ रहे थे डेरिवेटिव से, तो देयरफॉर उनकी अर्निंग्स आउटलुक पे इम्पैक्ट हो सकता है. बट वी हैव टू सी how that pans out. As I was saying, last time ऐसा कुछ ज़्यादा असर नहीं पड़ा था, but वो just a few handful हैं, countable on the fingers, so to say. So therefore, on the broader market, I don't think this has any impact. And yeah, maybe the government is trying to nudge people to think of, the capital markets more as a vehicle for long-term investments, and rather than just trying to be focused on very immediate trading and trying to make attempting to make quick money, because I have seen data which suggests that retail investors anyway lose a lot.
That's a SEBI report.
Yeah, we have seen that, right?
Correct.
So yeah.
So this is a slight change जो government का हुआ है. Then I also saw that we saw that before 31st December, a lot of people were getting nudge notices for income tax. So this seems to be like another nudge that towards people what to do. Like, do you think these kind of policies are what works rather than giving tax breaks or having some cost imposition or something like that in terms of changing investor behavior also, so to speak? आपको क्या लगता है?
Yeah, it's a interesting question. See, in any market, frankly, you have participants across the spectrum. There'll be just, very long-term investors, medium-term, and then traders. There'll be just individuals who'll have a portfolio which comprises of both components, both investing and some element of trading. So, of course, if any excess is done anywhere, that needs always to be, sort of corrected. And I guess that if data was showing that there's just too much of excess here, and lots of losses being incurred by a category of traders, then maybe the government was just trying to nudge them to kind of slow down on this. But yeah, that's how I'm thinking of this. I think we need a capital market which is liquid, both, in weight, in depth, everything. So all this is required, no doubt. But as I'm saying again, nothing which is in excess. So that's the limited point. And I think the regulator has to kind of always keep that in mind. And lastly, if I have to say something, is that India is one of those markets where anyway there is a structural opportunity. And where, being in the market rather than trying to do this timing in and out will be more important for genuine wealth creation, for the most appropriate forms of capital allocations to take place, which are truly beneficial, for everyone involved, whether it is firms who are raising resources and for investors who are putting in their savings into, companies, and hopefully, eventually companies which are, genuine, create value for themselves and for investors. That's the more important purpose of capital markets as I see it, over the medium long term.
So next question is about gold, but I know you are co-head equity at Mirae Asset. So just wanted to understand from your vantage point कि अभी जो हमने गोल्ड मार्केट में जो डिसलोकेशन देखा है, it has had an impact on equity because some markets globally the flows went out from equity and went into gold because safe haven buying चल रहा था. तो अभी जो डिसलोकेशन हुआ है, And now that the US trade deal was signed overnight, we are speaking today, and previous night the trade deal was announced, we haven't seen the details yet. Do you think that safe haven push will switch to equities and that might drive markets in India also? Because काफी flows भी बढ़ गए थे काफी fund houses में in gold and silver.
No, that's right. There has been strong flows. See, the thing is, we live. I don't think that gold. Though I myself am of the view that it's one should maybe have it. When you're doing your asset allocation, anywhere between that 5 to 10% range between gold and silver. And you're right that there was huge spurt in both prices for silver and gold recent times. And of course, after that kind of spurt, there's going to be some correction. We're in that phase right now. But frankly, when we step back and see the environment we are in, if you think of some of the biggest regions in the world, the US, for instance, and the kind of economy that is, it's of course a leading economy, cutting edge on technology, and yet it's a highly unequal economy. So what we are seeing in recent times, those political led, tariff kind of wars with the rest of the world, I think in some form or the other they will persist because there's a fair amount of inequality in that economy. It's not unlike say Europe or Japan and all that. So whoever would come to power, there'll be attempts to kind of reduce that. I would think for their vote basis, and so in terms of creating global uncertainty on the policy front in some form or the other. Right now it's underway through the tariff thing. It could be in some other ways. I think is here to stay. Additionally, the geopolitics we live in, the geopolitical environment we live with also will suggest that none of this is, disappearing soon. It's going to be a feature. I mean, after all, China completely gamed the system after they joined the WTO and, just set up these huge overcapacities and are trying to flood
Abhi bhi chal raha hai.
They're just flooding everywhere they can unless you, and that's a thing you have to kind of, fight with as well. So you've got on one hand two big, regions, and every country post-COVID or otherwise, or at least every big country, while is economically interlinked and is still wanting to pursue economic, sovereignty and independence, if I may. So that pursuit of economic independence on one hand, existing linkages, the geopolitics will always create a very heady mix for things, kind of unintended consequences and all kinds of, pressure points appearing. And then lastly, we have seen how some of these major countries of the world are also using whatever, advantages they have to leverage the system, to use them as choke points. So whether it is to use the currency or the current, the trade, or if you get or the interbank settlement and all of that, as pressure points on whichever country, etc., they're targeting. That has been disrupting the system and reducing everyone's confidence, if I may, on the global order as we have kind of gotten used to post 1945. So I'm sorry, I'm giving a long answer, but point being that in that backdrop, I think they'll be relevant for safe havens, and gold really fits into that, and therefore that need for it to be part of the portfolio anywhere between 5-10%. Silver has additional industrial usage and a lot of the new age applications. So therefore there's that additional demand. But yeah, I mean, therefore I would think that it should be relevant. But to your other question, whether flows from those will come back to equities. See, in India anyway we are getting inflows into equities through SIPs. So I'm not. There could be some marginal thing. I don't see some major changes. And globally also, I think if there's anything outflows from India, we're going more into emerging markets, for the AI and that kind of trade. So I'm not like really banking or assuming that there'll be some reverse inflows.
Next question is more about how the various sectors that you spoke about, say data centers, say electronics, which has been a last 10-year success story of India. Our exports have shot through the roof. It's kind of a self-reliant story, success story in a way. अभी जो इतना measures लिए हैं past few years में, और उसके बाद जो ये budget में announce हुआ है, specifically railways, high-speed rail, and the data center exemption that you spoke about, जो जो सेक्टर्स हैं जहाँ पे वैल्यू कैप्चर हो सकता है फ्रॉम अ रिटेल इन्वेस्टर पर्सपेक्टिव, they don't seem to be in the listed space yet. Like say Dixon, yes, they are getting the PLI benefit, but there are say certain sectors. Say I'll say an iPhone manufacturer is not listed in India. You may take any name. There might be moves to do that, but there इतना नहीं हुआ है अभी तक. Say from a large company scale. Similarly, sorry, it's a long question, but I think the context is important. Similarly, you see the data centers. I've seen a lot of private equity folks coming and investing in the infra of the data center. I've also seen, say, one conglomerate getting big time into data centers. So the value capture right now at this point in time seems to be outside the listed space, at least for retail investors. Institutional investors, they can offer different products, say, for the private side also for their clients. So how should a retail investor look at these themes? Because these are durable themes. These are like long-term themes.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to be a long-term investor, how should I look at what the announcements were in the past few days and what has been going on in the last few years also?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question, but I think the answer really lies in doing research, in trying to get some insightful, incisive analysis, and digging deep top down into these industries of relevance, and then maybe some ideas will come, and you can maybe identify some plays in the listed space which get to participate. So for instance, and you can pick any industry where it looks like there's going to be more capital spending. So if it's say data centers, then what goes into the data center besides the civil physical shell, but even that, the construction of that, there could be some plays there. There could be plays in the equipments which go into that, whether it's the HVAC, the cooling which is required. There could be plays there. Then the electronics and the electrical part. The one part which India will miss out at this stage under the data center capex will be the chips which go into the compute. That no doubt I think at this stage will be imported. But then the rest of it, whether it's the electrical, and the whatever level of transformers, etc., wiring, etc., there'll be Indian plays, listed companies. So there's a bunch of them. Yes, I mean any good engineering company will have a whole portfolio of products. So it's not like they're 100% indexed to data centers. They'll also be supplying their capital goods, or produced to an AC company will have an HVAC division catering to institutional clients, but they might also be having sales to retail clients. So it'll not be just a one-on-one play, but one has to figure out, those firms which have a reasonable amount of sensitivity or benefits coming from the enhanced capex on data centers. But there will be, plays right from the civil physical infrastructure to literally all equipment except the GPUs. And no doubt that GPUs, those units, those process, the chips are a reasonably large part of the capex. So that's one. And similarly, for instance, high-speed rail on the rail side. There will be corporates here in India listed, could be multinationals, it could be, and on again, same thing, right? The physical civil tracks, the signaling systems, the locos, the engines, lots of stuff which goes into it. The government itself has been trying to promote Indian, Make in India, Indian firms to kind of move up the value chain in the rail side as well. So I think it does require that bottom-up, study and identifying winners in all these categories of investments.
So I wanted to, last couple of questions, I wanted to start off the last few questions with one point about the Indian retail investor and the market's maturity over the last few years. You have seen it from a very close quarter, and also आपने जो investor से इतना बात किया रहेगा over a period of time, you must have met so many people. What is the one key difference that you have seen, especially अभी एक बजट के बाद जो एक सपोज मार्केट में थोड़ा डिसअपॉइंटमेंट होता है, वो एक दिन में डिसअपॉइंटमेंट होने के बाद 2-3 दिन के बाद खत्म हो जाता है. आई रिमेंबर फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर हैड टू मेक अनाउंसमेंट इन द पास्ट मेनी ईयर्स कि देखो कुछ नहीं होगा, एंड देन वो धीरज रखने के बाद दे टू रोल बैक. वो नहीं हो रहा है. कुड यू स्पीक टू दैट मैच्योरिटी इन द इंडियन इकोनॉमी? और एंड सो investors have also become very mature. लोगों को इतना आज हो गया खत्म, next we'll price in the remaining future whatever is the cues available. इसके बारे में थोड़ा अगर आप बात करें, because I think that this is one story which a lot of folks don't talk about regularly. I mean TV में बात करते हैं, but it's not something that is pointed out regularly in the media space.
No, you're right. It's a right observation, because a decade ago, with the kind of FI flows outflows we have seen in the last few quarters, the markets would not have held where they are. We would have been at much lower levels. It's really got to do with the maturity of the Indian investors, and maybe also the way the mutual fund industry has done a good job of communicating the products which are on offer, and kind of directing investors to look at equity as an asset class with a long-term view, and with moderating, return expectations, over just the immediate or the short term. Earlier instances, retail investor would get in at the peaks, say the TMT bubble or the GFC 2008, and then they would burn their fingers and not come back for a few years. But through the adoption and education of a product like the SIP, we are seeing continual inflows where investors are coming in with a longer horizon, and they are not necessarily getting perturbed by day-to-day volatility, because they know they parked this now with a 5-year, 10-year horizon. These volatility of the sort we have been seeing is actually an opportunity, because they're averaging at lower levels.
Correct, exactly. Yeah.
And of course, it does require confidence in the structural story of India, of which at least I have great conviction. But I'm sure, it's been communicated to investors again repeatedly. India is one of those few regions in the world where you can
Education बहुत ज़्यादा है.
But yeah, India is one of those few regions in the world where this structural opportunity is here to stay. It's a decadal opportunity. We're just a 4 trillion. There's nothing to prevent this becoming a 8-10 trillion over the years and beyond as well. Which means that there's going to be huge economic value add and growth. So there'll be firms. The job of investors will be to identify and stay with firms which can profitably participate in the growth which has to unfold. It could be across, large, mid, small, every cohort. And yes, there will be volatility in the short term. Sometimes this, tariff will come. Sometimes some other thing will, some war here, there. But if you're looking at this with a better horizon, a longer horizon, then it will not matter. And I think that behavior has gotten a bit more embedded, both in terms of the horizon and the expectation, which is clearly, supporting the markets as well.
Before I get to the last question, one thing based on what you said, I wanted to follow up. ये जो small cap space में fraud था, वो almost काफी कम हो गया है, and then mid cap space में कम हो गया है, and even the broader market has basically tamped down. So this basically for me feels like it's like a takeoff point. I don't know where the market will go, but it feels like that because इतना गिर गए थे हम, market इतना नीचे गिर गया था over the past few weeks. Abhi, after the budget, after the trade deal announcement with the US, I'll get to that question, but what do you see like the steady state being? Because there is a lot, अभी देखिए 2% ऊपर चले गया, 3% ऊपर चले गया, 5% इंट्राडे जाके फिर 2 माइनस में चले गया. That is a very emerging market phenomenon. वो होता है. Over the past say 4 years, ये कम हो गया था because we were maturing. So to just speak to your last point where you're saying that we have matured, but थोड़ा सा वो dislocation because of the trade deals and the geopolitics जो हुआ है, do you think that volatility might tamp down, or you think that will sustain over the few years that we've seen?
Can't really say about how the markets will behave in the short term and whether volatility will necessarily ebb or not. There can be enough things which we can't imagine right now, the unknown unknowns which can emerge and cause a spike up in volatility again, for some reason or the other. But, one thing I'm confident about is that notwithstanding the moves in the short term, over the medium term, if with the horizon of over a year and a half and beyond, the direction has to be up. Will be up. It's not as if we are at excessive valuations in any case as a starting point. And then when we think of growth, system growth, some of these cycles in the economy, whether it's the banking credit cycle, asset quality, even I might some parts of consumption which are already picking up on the discretionary, these could sustain for longer. We talked about how the budget is also provided support. So that, and then beyond that, just the structural opportunity of the of India, so to say. So that they would suggest that the trend has to be one of improving growth trajectory. Not just for 1 year, but over the years. Of course, corporates have to do a good job of kind of capturing it correctly and all of that, and doing a good job there. And if that is going to be the case, and starting valuations, let's say, are at average for large caps, then there's always going to be that there should be the power of compounding, which will be at play for investors who are thinking of equity markets with a 3, 5, 10 year kind of horizon. Short term is difficult to say, but in the times we live in, you never know, what might come up the next day. I mean, the tweets about tariffs going down also can change.
Exactly, we've seen that in the past also. Yeah. Fair enough. The last question is about the US trade deal. I mean, trade deal happened overnight. In the morning, I have to put this question to you.
Of course.
This has been something that has been in the slow burner for a while. And after the EU trade deal, this trade deal was announced. We don't have the details yet. But what do you think the market and investors should take from this announcement that happened overnight about the US trade deal being signed with India?
Well, actually, we've not seen the fine print, and I would be just a bit circumspect, because we've seen that these announcements come and then they can be reversed partially depending on on all sorts of whims and fancies. But if you ask me if it, I'm still very hopeful that it sticks at that 18%, and clearly it's positive if it sticks, because then we have had this pressure on the rupee and the outflow of foreign selling, FI selling. That should kind of at least take a pause, maybe reverse. While our macro has been very well managed, it's been stress tested during Ukraine, during COVID, last year as well, during the tariff wars. But this provides a further tailwind along with the EU trade deal. Of course, the EU trade deal, etc., are going to play out a few years into the future, but it just gives comfort to global investors who might have been a bit circumspect, a bit kind of cautious about India. Maybe India is in the that bucket where let these things get sorted. Maybe they start relooking afresh. And again, I don't think they'll find India wanting, because it is truly one of those few structural growth opportunities. So I mean, if the deal sticks, I think there's only positives to be had.
I bet retail investors and a lot of individual investors will be hoping that the trade deal sticks. Thank you so much for doing this with us, Gaurav. Thank you for taking out the time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Thanks.
गौरव मिश्रा के साथ बात करने के बाद एक चीज़ क्लियरली इमर्ज होती है, ग्लोबल अनसर्टेनिटी के बीच में भी इंडिया का स्ट्रक्चरल मोमेंटम स्टेडी है. शॉर्ट टर्म वॉलेटिलिटी रहेगी, लेकिन इंडिया की लॉन्ग टर्म ग्रोथ स्टोरी इंटैक्ट बनी हुई है. अगर आपको ये एपिसोड पसंद आया हो तो हमारे यूट्यूब चैनल को ज़रूर सब्सक्राइब करें. आप बाजार एंड बियॉन्ड का ऑडियो वर्जन मेजर पॉडकास्ट प्लेटफॉर्म्स में भी सुन सकते हैं. तो मिलते हैं अगले एपिसोड में. तब तक के लिए स्टे सेफ एंड इन्वेस्ट वाइजली.
Investments in securities markets are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.